wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to The Conversation. Today we'll be talking about Palestine. It is now over 18 months since Israel went on an all-out assault on the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. There has been two ceasefires, but both of them has now broken. The second one ended a week or so ago. But now the Israeli onslaught seems to be worse than ever. The attempt to cut Gaza off and to grab Palestinian land seems to be in full swing. This has now been expedited essentially by a hawkish U.S. administration who seem to support genocidal attempt of Israeli government in Gaza. Today we will be talking about the reality on the ground and what can we really do. We will try to understand the political issues around it. We'll try to understand the humanitarian situation about it, and we'll try to make sense of what we can do to raise our voice on this issue and to stand for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, to discuss these issues and to help us make sense of this dire state of affairs. We are joined by Yasrab Shah, Fundraising Director, Muslim Hands, in the studio. Yasrab Shah, welcome. And thank you for joining us.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. And we are also joined by Dr. Makram Balawi, who is Secretary General of the League of Parliamentarians for Al-Quds and Palestine from Istanbul. Dr. Makram, welcome to The Conversation. Assalamu alaikum, and how are you?
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Okay. We will also be joined by Dr. Abdul Bari, author and former Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, in a moment. But first, Dr. Makram, can I get a sense of where things are or how things are at present in Palestine, particularly in Gaza?
Well, basically, we can't separate Gaza from the West Bank because what's happening in Gaza right now is happening also in the West Bank, but at a lower scale. Now, people concentrate more on the scene in Gaza Strip because of the big calamity, but actually in the West Bank, the Israelis are following almost the same strategy by destroying refugee camps as they did in Tul-Karim camp and also in Jenin camp. So we're talking about now about 100,000 people displaced in the West Bank, let alone those who were killed by the Israelis. So basically what's happening in Gaza is a magnified picture of what's happening in the West Bank. The Israelis have a clear strategy, which is not a secret now because they are talking about it in their media, and also now they are not hiding it anymore. That is basically turning historical Palestine in a state for Jews only. So they're adamant on reading it to get rid of the Palestinians, the indigenous people, and turning Palestine, or now Israel, as they might like to call it, into a Jewish state in the literal meaning of the word. In Gaza Strip, when the last ceasefire happened, about 70% of the buildings were destroyed by the Israeli occupation. Now we're talking about 90%. From day one, they had a strategy in their mind that to make life in Gaza impossible, so they systematically worked on destroying all sorts of livelihood or organizations or infrastructure, hospitals, schools, universities, bakeries, marketplaces, you name it. So they wanted to use this kind of force just to convince the Palestinian people that they have no place in Gaza and they have to leave their homeland to Egypt, to Jordan, to whatsoever. But of course, as you know, the Palestinians, they did not lean and they did not kneel, and for that the Israelis has to use more and more force, and basically they're relying on this at breaking the will of the Palestinian people and force them out of Gaza Strip.
Thank you. Dr. Makram will discuss in more detail, inshallah. But Yasrab, if I could come to you, can we get a sense of the, and I don't really have words to say, describe the humanitarian situation. It has already been dire, but the current onslaught seems to be more aggressive, more brutal, and more overarching than it has ever been. Are you able to shed in a light?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say, Barrister Talha, that we've, as Muslim Hands, we've even very recently in Ramadan appealed directly for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. I don't think it's been lost on any of us that this current blockade of Gaza started on Saturday, the 1st of March, as we were commencing Ramadan.
Ramadan, yes.
That's no coincidence. Unfortunately,
And I think about 300 people, mostly women and children.
I think on the first night. Yeah, and then on the night of the bombardment within Ramadan, I think 404 of our brothers and sisters lost their lives. It's not been lost on us that it's always in and around Ramadan. SubhanAllah, I've been at Muslim Hands now 19 years, and sadly we've had to respond to the Gaza emergencies, with plural. Unfortunately, as there is a euphemism they use that they cut the grass in Gaza, which basically essentially means there will be a military assault on our brothers and sisters in Gaza. I was there as a young 19-year-old before all of this happened, the siege began. I can tell you from my own personal experience of being in Gaza that the people were absolutely wonderful and hospitable. I mean, some of the, you can say easily the elite members of our Muslim Ummah who we're incredibly proud of, and we pray for them day and night for their safety and security. But I want to be very clear about something here. We have been delivering people zakat and sadaqah, so the TV1 viewers who, mashallah, who have donated so beautifully and generously during and before Ramadan and over these last 18 months, in truth. Their amana and their sadaqah, we took a strategic decision that we would push that aid into Gaza through the largest UN aid agency bodies operating throughout the Gaza Strip. It was not an easy decision to make, but
UNRWA, was it UNRWA?
Yeah. So we've actually got three. So there's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, at which no point did we think when we started to work with them about 5-6 years ago that they themselves would have their name besmirched. Then we also worked with the World Food Programme, and also most recently with UNICEF. But I just want to share a message really for the TV1 viewers, because we've listened very carefully. We have weekly meetings with them. We listen very carefully to their updates, and we have very frank conversations. I was very clear with them, Barrister, that I said, how does this recent action compare in terms of the humanitarian crisis to over the last 18 months? They were categorical in saying the situation right now is the worst it's been in the 18 months, completely. And I do want to share this very...
Probably worst that it has ever been.
Yeah, ever been in Gaza. Yeah, ever been in Gaza. And in terms of the humanitarian situation, the reality is, and we don't want to sugarcoat or hide it from the TV1 viewers, the reality is our partners, I mean, there's the largest aid agencies throughout the Gaza Strip saying we are down to the last week of food. That's where we're at. This has not happened even in those 18 months. There was never a time where the food stock fell to this level. And I'm sorry to be the bringer of bad news, but I just want to give a reality and the truth of what's happening on the ground. The truth is, about a week or so ago, our own partner, the World Food Programme, which, by the way, I want to be clear, they're the largest aid agency on planet Earth that deliver aid in emergency situations. They had to close their 25 bakeries across the Gaza Strip. Why is that? Because they ran out of flour and fuel to actually keep those bakeries open. So the other side can say what they want about there's plenty of aid in there. The proof's in the pudding.
Okay.
The World Food Programme will not close its bakeries when it has flour and fuel. So that's the first thing I want to mention. They told us this week alone that the food parcels, and they would give a ration of, say, for every 15 days they would distribute to thousands of families across the Gaza Strip. They said we have no food parcels left to distribute. And these had ready-to-eat, high protein, high calorie meals. They've run out of food
and they've
parcels.
run out because the supply can't reach them.
Because on Saturday, the 1st of March, they shut it down. And the last thing I will say in terms of the situation, no doubt we'll revisit this point, is that where we're at now then, so what is left actually? That's, I guess, the question, isn't it? Where we are right now is we're in the last week of supply of hot food, which again we appealed for during Ramadan. And they said beyond that, after that, the only thing left in our storehouses throughout the Gaza Strip, which alhamdulillah the World Food Programs were barely damaged, but our other partners, UNRWA, were heavily damaged. They said we are down to high energy biscuits, which they have very little nutritional value. It's something that the escaping the barrel.
Yeah, it just keeps people alive barely.
Yeah,
Right.
it lacks nutritional.
Let's go to
impact.
Dr. Bari. Dr. Bari, one of the things, I mean, there's been allegations of war crime, intention to commit genocide, ethnic cleansing, and so on, many times before. But this time, it's quite clear. Israel has taken aim at civilian infrastructure. It has destroyed hospitals, targeted journalists, humanitarian workers. Even British charities had their volunteers and employees killed by Israeli shells. And now we have a U.S. administration which appears to support a clear breach of initiatives which are clear in a breach of international law. So where are we? I mean, how do you make sense, or how do you read this situation where a government, a major global power, blatantly talk about things which are in breach of international law, and there doesn't appear to be any sense of outcry from global leaders?
Well, nothing is surprising nowadays. Everything is normal. What I say is rules-based international order or disorder is a reality. Law of the jungle is a reality. And watching from the scene, Muslim countries, especially Arab countries, doing $1 trillion business with a superpower, that's a normal thing. And unlike the brother Muslim Hand, I am not in the field, but I try to follow. And sometimes I don't want to follow anything because
soul destroying.
Sorry.
I say soul destroying to follow and realize there is nothing you can do.
It's very painful, and because nothing is working. UN has failed. Muslim countries, well, it's not failing because Muslim countries don't mean anything, especially Arab world, and those who are supporting, in effect, supporting the perpetrators. And the recent visit of Mr. Netanyahu to White House just probably sealed the deal. What to do, and if there is any other worse word than genocide, I don't know what it is. Probably extermination is also more or less. That's the plan now, direct plan. And world is doing politics, tariff politics, this politics, that politics. It doesn't mean anything to the world. It's a collapse of whole human soul in the sense. We should not be that pessimist, but the problem is there was semblance of some rule in the world. And that's
at least there was a notional allegiance to abide by rules, whether they mean it or not. But now it seems even that mask has fallen off.
Yeah, that has fallen off, and even the courtesy of saying something, everything has been unmasked. And so praying is one thing, helping as much as possible, humanly possible, is another thing. But I cannot imagine how brothers, sisters, children, women, and everyone are coping and how long they can cope. But I think when the world fails, global leaders, Muslims, and everybody fails, there may be some way that we don't know. So when Mongols destroyed the whole Muslim empire in the 13th century, then suddenly the Mongols, many of them became Muslims.
Yeah, the Khanates themselves, most of them.
And also
Muslims.
Women played a very important part in that as well. So I come from Bangladesh, and when there was no hope, suddenly we saw that students succeeded. So these are called miracles, but miracle also happen when there are endeavors and attempts to do something. Then Allah gives additional help that becomes a miracle. So I don't see at this moment any Muslim country or any international force doing something that Allah will bless it and make it
So briefly, I mean, you've already addressed this, but if I could just zoom in on this. I mean, historically,
yeah.
How objective, many people questioned this before, but historically, U.S. was seen as the the peace broker in Israel,
Yeah.
Palestine. But President Trump's position is very, very clear. He wants
Yeah.
Gaza to be cleansed of Palestinians.
Sure.
So essentially, his position is even more hawkish than Netanyahu himself.
Yeah.
After the US, the next ones in line, typically European Union, UK, they play an important role, even if verbally. Do you see any global leadership emerging on this issue which seek to counter what Trump is trying to do in order to uphold some notion of international law and accountability for Israelis?
I think the plan is to divert people from the Gaza, and the tariff is just a show. So people are busy, countries are busy. America seems to be busy, so that nobody can shine the light on the Gaza issue or Palestine issue now. That's my understanding. It's just a diversion technique.
So people are deliberately engaged, even if global leaders, even if they
Yeah.
want to think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
They are put in a position where they have more important and pressing issues for their own interest to
Yeah.
attend to. Right, let's go to Dr. Makram again. Dr. Makram, one of the things that Israeli seems to have done is they seem to have set up this farcical thing called Voluntary Resettlement Initiative or Department, which directly, indirectly, some in Israeli cabinet has spoken before, but this time they seem to have formalized some form of arrangement to support or promote or facilitate what they call voluntary resettlement for the Palestinians. Is there any appetite for any Palestinians to voluntarily resettle somewhere, or has there been any movement on this front to resettle them somewhere forcibly or otherwise? Yes, Dr. Makram.
Yeah. I think the Palestinian people have tried earlier to leave their homeland. In 1948 and in 1967, the Arab governments promised the Palestinians that they'll put a halt or to stop the Zionist project. But unfortunately, all those who left Palestine were not able to go back to their homeland and lived as refugees. So the Palestinians simply, they don't want to repeat this very negative experience, and they are ready to pay with their lives for staying in their homeland. Since the beginning of Gaza war, we have witnessed Palestinians dying under the rebels while they were able to migrate or try to reach to the Egyptian side. The Egyptians always said that we won't accept any Palestinian refugees, but the initiative actually came from the Palestinian side. And I remember in the beginning of the war, the border crossing was open. So many people thought that the Palestinians will rush out of Gaza, but what happened was the opposite. Those people, Palestinian people, who were temporarily outside Gaza Strip, they attempted going in, which was really something unexpected at all. So no, basically, Palestinians are not intending to leave their homeland, whether it's in the West Bank or Gaza Strip. But always the question is, how could we help them continue? This is a big question, because I think now the world system, if there is such a world system, is completely paralyzed. So, in
Now,
my opinion,
before you go to that point, but can I just labor on this one more, a little bit more? So we've discussed this already, but before the second ceasefire, which came into force earlier in the year, the situation was pretty bad. I mean, 70 to 90% of Gaza's buildings were destroyed, demolished. The health infrastructure were brought to its knees. And so now, if we look at the onslaught, there isn't really any military installations for Israel to destroy. It's quite clear that they are hell-bent on making it impossible for humans to live in Gaza. How long do you think Gazans, and of course to a lesser extent in West Bank and other West Bank, how long do you think Gazans can withstand this onslaught?
I think the question should be how long the world will stand idle. The Gazan people will stay there even if they die. But are we going to stand watching them dying? This is, I think, the question. We have to think of a way to finish this terrible situation. It's not the responsibility of the Gaza people. It's not their mistake that they are demanding freedom. The world did not give them freedom or justice for about 1 century now. So what can they do? Should they leave their homeland or just wait for death? They have done their responsibility, resisted the occupation. So what's the responsibility of the Muslim Ummah, the Arab world, rest of the world, international system? And why should the Americans act as if they are God? They are not God, they are human beings. They can be defeated, they have their interest in the Islamic world and in the rest of the world. They can be pressurized. If they are pressurized, they'll pressurize Israel and it'll be all over. But now Muslims in general and rest of the world is not ready to take the risk or to pay any price, and for that, this tragedy continues.
Thank you. Dr. Bari, if I could come back to you on, there are great sort of hope, or perhaps hope only because there's no other positives to cling on to. But when South Africa brought this case in international court against Israel, and eventually an arrest warrant was issued against Netanyahu, along with various other leaders of Israeli government and Hamas, there was a little bit of hope that this might finally bring some pressure on Israel to act within international law. Do you see any hope in that? I mean, do you see anything coming out of this process at the ICC? Or going to the Dr. Makram's question, how long will the world witness Gazans and the wider Palestinians brutally killed in their own land? Do you think the world will actually take a note of what is happening, and do you see any hope?
Well, subhanallah. As Brother Makram mentioned, international order has totally collapsed. Even the UN Secretary General begs. I follow his tweets. Can you imagine UN Secretary begging things and nobody giving a damn? And in fact, the plausible genocide or whatever it is, those who are accused of doing things, they are given the red carpet in capitals, and capital of the most powerful world, leader of the world. And so that means whatever international rule was there is it doesn't have any value, as there is as just a word in a piece of paper at the moment. And so it seems very fatalistic at the moment. And look at the Muslim world, and some countries are competing to have higher, taller building than the Burj Al Khalifa. 5 or 50 billion dollars. Is this the priority for a Muslim country, especially with all the money that they have? And so two of the countries probably are supporting U.S. economy by probably $2 trillion. So if this is the leader of the Muslim world, then what will the other do? So in a way, as I mentioned, I don't see any worldly.
So you don't. I mean, looking at it rationally, you are not very hopeful. But of course, as Muslims, we believe
but as
that
Muslims, we have
there
to
is God, and God
something.
may have other plans.
Suddenly, something may come
Right.
from somewhere we don't know. As I mentioned, we are all desperate about Bangladesh situation. Suddenly something happens. Syria had changed a bit, alhamdulillah. And but there, I don't see any worldly equation as to how, given the resilience and total determination of destroy whole of the Gazan people and Palestinian, I don't see any worldly way of finding any solution of this.
Thank you. Yes, sir. We've talked about the dire situation. I mean, I said dire, but I think dire is probably not dire enough to sufficient to describe how it is. But these, I mean, UN aid organizations has come under attack. UNRWA essentially were delegitimized by Israel and prevented from operating. And the UN, Israel made it quite clear that it has no confidence on the United Nations, nor does it respect the United Nations institutions. So, where do you see, I mean, how do you see the humanitarian situation improving in any way?
Sure. So I think.
Of course, we want to be optimistic.
Yeah, no. So I think when I spoke last, rather like our esteemed doctors on the panel, it was all very negative. I would say there was on Monday, just this week. I mean, 4 days ago, there was a joint statement of all the UN aid agency bodies, which is rare. You don't see a joint statement where they really pushed upon world governments to respect international order, no doubt, release the hostages, that was being very clear, but to allow humanitarian aid to flood into Gaza. Where we are right now...
Just to be clear, whether Hamas releases hostages or not, that's a separate issue. I mean, it may itself be a breach of international...
Well, in fact, there was a ceasefire deal,
but that does
where
not
eventually
justify,
that was going to happen, but something...
Obviously, that doesn't justify Israel retaliating by breaching international law and cutting off humanitarian aids and so on.
So, though there's been moves before by the IDF and the like to shut down the borders of Gaza, it's never been as prolonged as this. That's actually just a fact. We can look at the last over 18 months. We had an aid tracker that was provided to us by UNRWA because, of course, like UNRWA's own donors and our own donors, they ask, is the aid actually getting in? So alhamdulillah, they provided us with a real-time tracker, but even if you remember when the Philadelphia corridor was occupied, even the aid trucks at that point were stopped, but there were still some aid trucks coming in, and also unofficially, commercial vehicles are also coming in. Where we are at now, and here's a ray of optimism, inshallah, and we pray for this, is that we heard unconfirmed reports from UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, earlier this week, 2 days ago, suggesting that aid trucks would be allowed to come in on Monday. And we're praying for that, by the way.
This coming Monday?
This Monday, yes, because it's Friday now, so we're talking about 2-3 days' time, which absolutely coincides with when there's going to be no food left. And the horrific point in our mind, in our humanitarian sector, is, many of us who are educated in the West would have seen horrendous things in our World War I, World War II classes in history, where we saw people in World War I, World War II, starving to death, literal skeletal. And we're starting to see that in Gaza now. I believe this is brinkmanship. And Allah knows best, I'm no expert of geopolitics, but I believe there was an attempt by certain factors, we don't need to name them, it's obvious who they are, to really squeeze the position that Hamas and others had taken, or even to change the public opinion within Gaza, to put it in a situation where there would be an uproar against the ruling government there, and to really force their hand. This was as pure brinkmanship as it becomes. And again, I'm hopeful, because we don't know, but we did have it checked by UNRWA even officially, and they have indeed been communicated with, that come Monday they are being told to prepare for their aid trucks to enter into Gaza. We're praying for that, because before we all go, alhamdulillah, and a sigh of relief, this has happened before, and aid still hasn't got in. It's never been as bad as this. I'm very hopeful that there will be a change in that. And I can tell you, the last time there was the ceasefire, our UN aid agency partners literally flooded Gaza with aid. And I mean the scale that there were around about 600 trucks entering into Gaza. Some of those were commercial trucks, but the vast majority were humanitarian. And they did the right thing, and I'll be very clear about that, and I support their action. They stockpiled aid into Gaza in the fear that this tentative ceasefire at that time may fall and break. It's been worse than that, in that there's been a blockade since Saturday the 1st of March, over now, nearly 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We're getting to 6 weeks now, just to be clear. And also, on top of that, the bombing, where one of our own partners, UNICEF, were quite clear and said, since that bombing began, every day in Gaza, 100 children have either been martyred or severely injured. It's never been as vicious as it has been in these last few days and weeks. So we're hopeful, inshallah, as believers, as Muslims, as you alluded to in our faith, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for divine intervention, because when they say when it's the darkest hour, that's when the light comes. And Allah shows us that every single day in the and the night. When it's at the darkest time, then Fajr will come. So we are no doubt we are in the darkest hour in Gaza. I have to be very clear. It's not like we are hopeful that the light is coming. Our position as a humanitarian aid agency is, as soon as that happens, we too will stand by the UN aid agencies and flood Gaza with aid, as much as we can humanly get.
So in terms of aid, I mean, there is the issue of logistically getting the aid in, and that's where
so they have pre-positioned, I think the last count, over 16,000 tons of metric aid. It's literally sitting on the border. This is the UN agencies, the World Food Programme, UNRWA, UNICEF, have been waiting 6 weeks. Don't forget, it's not that they've just been told and now they're going to do something about it. Pre-positioned aid on every single entry point into Gaza.
So there are sufficient supply of aids if it's allowed to go in at the moment.
This is it. As soon as the IDF give permission for that aid to enter, it will be flooded with aid. I can guarantee you that. So there was over, I think, 60 metric tons that entered during the ceasefire, and there is over 16 metric tons waiting to just pour in as soon as the first day.
16,000.
Yeah, 16,000. So we are ready to go. We are geared up. So it's not, okay, so we'll have to react. No, we are ready to roll and bring the humanitarian aid in. And I think one thing a couple of things I would share is what we've heard from our own partners on the ground. And I have to also be very clear that amongst them are UNRWA, who themselves have lost over 280 of their own staff, have been martyred whilst delivering their zakat and sadaqah peoples. And that comes out over, I think, over 408 humanitarian aid workers that have been killed mercilessly during this time. So they are on the front line. And you know what? They said that there's two principles they talk about. They talk about thabat and samud, which is what our dear doctors were alluding to. You asked the question about, are the Palestinians looking to leave? It's the opposite. That they use the term thabat and samud. Thabat, it means stability and hold fast, and samud means to stand fast in the face of incredibly difficult times. This is their position. They are absolutely willing. We've seen it over 18 months, willing to stay on their land because they don't want a repeat of the Nakba, where they were forced off their land.
Well, this time it's also very clear that those who want to push them out want to do so without even a promise of a right to return.
There will be no right of return.
It's quite clear.
And I find it really, as a human, before anything else, I feel so sad that we live in a world in which we can use terms like real estate as a euphemism for ethnic cleansing.
Right. On that note, we'll take a break and come back and discuss this in more details. You're watching The Conversation, a special edition of it today, taking stock of issues in Palestine. We're joined by esteemed panel of guests, and we're exploring with them the current situation. After the break, we will talk about what we can do, what we should be continuing to do to support and facilitate a resolution of this situation. Stay with us. Assalamu alaikum and conversation after a brief break. We've been talking about Palestine. We've been trying to make sense of the current situation in Palestine. There is no other way to put it. It is a dire state of affairs, something that is heart-wrenching, causes every human being with a mind, with a heart to feel the pain, to feel depressed, to feel demoralized, to be hopeless. But of course, we can't be hopeless. We remain hopeful. We remain optimistic that a solution will come. Before the break, we were talking about what has been happening and what can we make of it. Now, we've only got about 15 minutes, and we'd like to focus on what we have been doing right and what we can continue to do right. And we'll look at, in the UK as a community, what we should be doing, and we'd also look at globally what needs to happen, and we'll look at from a humanitarian perspective. I know many of you have been very, very generous, but what else can you do and should you be doing? Dr. Bari, if I could come to you first and foremost. The British community, not just Muslims, but across Britain, yeah, the Palestine issue has been a very widely touched issue, and many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have demonstrated their solidarity to the Palestinians. What can the Muslim community and the wider British people do to support the Palestinians, leaving aside the humanitarian issues, but at a political front in terms of forcing some kind of solution or resolution to the issue?
I think this should continue, and that's one aspect. The other two things that happened in recent probably days, one of them was some prominent lawyers are now trying to more or less prosecute those British citizens who were fighting for Israel in the IDF. So that was one news a few days ago, and only recently there was another news that was the recent one.
There is also one on about, I think, the Tayyip Ali and various others going after British officials, especially use of British parts in F-35. So I think the MPs, parliamentarians also come forward to push and demand answers as to...
From a country like Britain, these are important steps is from the Muslims, non-Muslims collectively, and so that the issue is not allowed to just be forgotten. That is fundamentally important. But I think for Muslims across the world, we are a big number. I said the number can be an asset, number can be a liability.
Yeah, we're about a fifth of the global population.
Yeah, so if Muslims in different countries, different places, including in Britain, what we have to do is, one is short-term demonstration, all these are fine and they should keep this issue alive. On the other hand, our professionals, our academics, our teachers and our community should be so energized to play their role in the mainstream society for technological research, and so that talented people should try to go up in the ladder in their career, because at the end of the day, we can see many famous academics, this and that, from different communities. We don't have enough that has social, intellectual, political capital, and that will carry weight. It is a bit long term, but if every Muslim or every conscious Muslim tries in his or her own way, at the end of the day, we will be responsible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Day of Judgment as an individual person, what we have done, what we could have done, and what we have done. So I think this is one of the grassroots activism that we need to bring in and empower our communities so that we can challenge when it is needed in the language that is civil language. We should not give up.
Two things we have seen is, one, there's been a lot of concern about how mainstream media has been framing or covering the issue of Palestine, especially Gaza. And the other is the onslaught on people to squeeze the space, narrow the space for people to express their views. And often the issue of anti-Semitism has also been used, and to some extent the allegation extremism. How do you say, you've been in public life for a long time and have faced some of these issues yourself, how would you say the professionals and the ordinary people going about should navigate or push back on these things?
I think we should learn the art of expressing ourselves. Language and everything is fundamentally important. And the problem with these Muslim organizations or many organizations is they are basically busy with their own workforce, busy with their small world, and very few of them come into the mainstream civil society activism. And to me, organizations like Muslim Council of Britain, Citizens UK is a grassroots civil society organization, and we fought for Living US campaign. And I think Citizens UK type organization is more important at the moment because
faith, trade union, and civil society organizations.
Trade union, we work with trade union groups. I think that should be energized, and through that, Muslims will be getting experience of wider experience, as well as others will feel comfortable that we are working with them. Just isolating ourselves in our own small world and making dua or just attending demonstration. Making dua, I think, demonstration is fundamentally important. I'm not saying anything negative about that, but just doing this.
We need to do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Bari, thank you. Let's go to Dr. Makram. What are you doing and what are you expecting the global community to do, or how do you think the global community of people can support or show solidarity to the Palestinian cause?
In my opinion, there are many strategies. One is a long-term strategy, and one is a short or immediate term strategy. What we need now is not a long-term strategy. We need something immediate, because we're talking about days, maybe weeks, that Palestinians in Gaza Strip might break simply. So we need to save them before they reach this kind of condition. How to do that? Basically, by pressurizing the Americans. We have to think, how could we pressurize the Americans through pressurizing their interests, whether directly or indirectly. If we manage to do that as a global movement, I'm not talking, by the way, about governments, because Arab and Muslim governments in general, they are in a line completely with
many of them often rely for their own survival on the U.S. security guarantees. So the idea that they will stand up to U.S. perhaps is a fallacy.
Yeah. So I'm talking basically on the public. So we have to think in that way.
So how can ordinary people put pressure on the U.S.? I mean, do you have any suggestions?
Well, we have seen examples where people could topple governments and change regimes. Why not in this case? Why don't they start a campaign of boycotting the United States? Not only economically, but also stop traveling to the United States.
Socially, culturally, educationally.
Sorry?
So socially, culturally, educationally.
Everything. If let's say that 10 Muslim countries declare this in one time, let's take the biggest Muslim countries, they bound to find a solution. When the last ceasefire, by the way, was under American pressure. And Netanyahu and his government did not want a ceasefire. So it was Witkoff, because he was commissioned by Donald Trump, has to come to the area and force Netanyahu to sign a temporary ceasefire. They are now negotiating another ceasefire because Trump wants to visit Saudi Arabia, and he doesn't want the war going on while he's in a visit to Saudi Arabia. So American interests decide everything. The question, with all due respect, is not to send aid or to write in a newspaper or to make a demonstration. You know, Israelis are demonstrating in Tel Aviv, hundreds of thousands of them, but they are not able to stop the war nor pressurize their own government. So we need something practical. Basically, we have to pressurize the United States, and immediately, if we succeed in doing that, they will, in their turn, pressurize Israel and stop the war immediately.
Thank you. Yasra, very briefly, three things, two things I want from you. One is, what should Muslim organizations, especially those who are involved in humanitarian work, what should they be continuing to do, should be doing, and how can the people that are watching support you?
So I'm a big believer in the Quranic principle of idfa' billati hiya ahsana sayyi'ah, that Allah commands us on an individual level and also as a collective, that we should repel. This is the word, the imperative that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran. Repel evil with what is better, meaning good. That's our position. My own personal sanity, as I was just saying to you in the break, has been through pumping more and more aid in. Do khair, respond to that evil, and it is evil, it's munkar, there's no question of that. It's detestable what we're seeing, but to respond to that with goodness. Now that can come in many different forms. That could be in the form of charity, which we've seen, mashallah, the TV1 viewers open their hearts to various charities like Muslim Hands and the other charity partners here on TV1. And I would urge people to continue to donate their zakat, the sadaqah. The advice I would have to my fellow charity partners here on TV1 is to be steadfast and stand by. This is what we said, that principle that we've learned directly from the Palestinians. So they should be prepared to also, inshallah, we hopeful, make dua for it that on Monday that the aid will open. I think we're also there needs to be an antidote to the times we live in. If we listen very carefully to our esteemed scholars around the Muslim Ummah, they tell us that we are in the epoch, in the era of al-marhala al-ghutha'iyya. What does that literally mean? That literally means, based on the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, where he warned us in prophecy that other nations would literally devour us as if they were coming to a banquet, to a dinner. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhu were shocked upon hearing this. They said, "Are we nahnu qaleel yawma idin? Are we few in number?" And we've been talking about this earlier. He said, alayhi salatu bal antum kathir. No, you're vast in number. But the problem is, you're like the froth or the scum of the ocean. There's many of you. We think there's about 2 billion of us. We proudly announced that last Ramadan. Maybe 1 in 4 people even on planet Earth are Muslim. The issue is not numbers. The problem is, as the hadith identifies, that cast into our hearts is wahan, which even the Sahaba radiallahu anhu didn't understand. What does this word, technical word, mean in the Arabic language? The Rasul this is now, hearing the problem, hopefully there's an antidote. He said, Hubbu dunya wa karahiyatul maut. He gave 2 reasons. What is the issue? He's talking about our times, to be clear. He says that the Muslims are plagued with the love of this dunya and hatred of death. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who don't have this obsession and love for this dunya, and that we care for our brothers and sisters around the world, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, and especially our brothers and sisters in Gaza, by continuing to donate for them, by continuing to pray for them. I had my own teacher say to me, "You're not serious about Gaza. Go to any protest that you want. You're not serious about Gaza if you didn't set your clock to stand up to pray tahajjud and beg Allah and protest before Allah to save the people of Gaza. You're not serious." Honestly, this is our own teacher saying that. So that's the first thing I would say. And the other thing is, I think we need to get over this hatred of death, which is something that I'm afraid has been poisoned in our modern Muslim psyche, living here, we can say the West or wherever you want, modern Muslims. So I would urge people to remain optimistic. And at the time when you think all hope is lost, you will see divine intervention. I mean, I'll give just 2 very simple examples, which we all know very well. The Tayr and Ababil. When Abraha came with a mighty army to wipe out the Kaaba and the people of Makkah, genocidal intent, what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just sent birds against them. When even in the future, when Gog and Magog will come besieging the Muslims around Mount Tur, is it that the Muslims fight back and destroy them? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends insects that bite them in their necks. The reality is, Allah is in charge of all the matter. He categorically said on the tongue of his Rasul, even if the entire humanity and jinn kind gathered to harm you, none of that harm would happen without God's will. Allah's in charge. But we will be questioned. What did we do? So we must be prepared to stand before our Lord and say, we did do something. And when I mean by something, I mean absolutely repel evil with good.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good point to end on. You're watching The Conversation. Today we've been talking about the Palestine issue, an issue that is close to all of our hearts, an issue that has and continues to cause all of us to grieve, to feel anxious about, to feel deeply about. Today we've tried to focus on understanding what the situation on the ground is. There's no better way to put it. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine, in Gaza, are without food, without shelter, without security. Their situation, words will not be sufficient to describe the dire state of affairs there. We need to come forward with everything that we have to support them, to pressure our governments, to pressure our media, to pressure the civil society and those that make decisions, to support humanitarian organizations with everything that we have, so that when the opportunity comes, they are able and sufficiently funded to support. And ultimately, we need to stand in prayers in night, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our help. Thank you very much for watching The Conversation. Until next time, that's all from us. Allah Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.